When we need to modify the schema in a way that can't be expressed in XML, we can use schema patches. Schema patches are very similar to data patches. They are a bit like the setup scripts we used to use before declarative schema came around. Naturally, schema patches are executed before data patches. One use case for schema patches would be creating stored routines or triggers. These are part of the database schema, but they cannot be declared in XML. Let's do an example, a trigger that enforces each word in the brand names to have a capital first letter and also ensures the description starts with a capital character too, but leaves the rest of the description unchanged. We could, of course, do this in PHP on the application level. This would probably be a simpler, all-over better approach, but this is a fun little example. Stored routines and triggers can make sense, however, in multi-language environments. For example, if not only PHP, but also Node and raw SQL inserts are used. Be warned, triggers and stored routines are not common scenarios, and the resulting code isn't very pretty. I decided to use it as an example nevertheless, because it might turn out to be helpful to someone. And another word of caution. It's probably best to only create a system with business logic stored in the database when working on project-specific code. In modules that are supposed to run on many instances of Magento, it is likely not the ideal solution. Also, keep in mind that the database may be split into different segments, that is, default, checkout, and sales. The SQL logic in a trigger should not cross those boundaries. That said, let's get to it. We will build this feature in 2 steps. First, we will create some stored functions we can call from the trigger. For example, an SQL equivalent of the PHP function UCWords. These stored functions will be called by the trigger that we will then create in a second step. Let's start by creating the schema patch class. Schema patches reside in a directory setup patch schema within a module. Let's call our class enforce brand casing. And it needs to implement the schema patch interface. So we need to implement apply and get aliases and get dependencies. The get aliases and the get dependencies methods were already discussed in the videos about data patches. For schema patches, they work in exactly the same way. So for this example, we'll just return an empty array for both. Next, we will implement the apply method in the next videos.